right, guys, Planet Zoo news, a little bit slow lately. They've kind of had to rein it in a little bit, I think. I don't know if they're going to have any involvement with Twitch London. I haven't heard anybody mention it as of recording this. I haven't seen Bo or anybody tweet about it. I really think their next big plans, looking towards the end, or looking towards August with Gamescom, they're going to have a booth. And a couple days ago, Bo even tweeted out if there are any streamers that are going to be in Germany attending the show, she might have some streaming opportunities for you with Planet Zoo. So really, really exciting August to look forward to. But nonetheless, we did get another developer journal, and it's really focused on climbing. And I know that is something that we have, there's a lot of, it lends itself to a lot of speculation, how much of the animal's going to use the stuff we put in. And once we go through this developer journal here in a sec, we understand that there are going to be pieces that are tagged for climbing. So what we're saying is, like, you know, not every single thing in the entire game is going to be climbable, which, if you read onto this with me, becomes a little more understandable because of the programming side of it. In the coding side, a game has never done this before as far as the animals actually having to make real-time decisions. And Richard and Felix from Frontier actually go into a little bit of detail about that, as far as, yes, like what the animals they've had to actually create them to how to learn how to do is to navigate in real time what to jump on, what to climb on, what can be climbable. And they actually go into some detail about having to come up with what, in their words, they're like, we have to think of so many different situations that people are going to try, that it is pretty mind-boggling. You know, what all that, you know, we're having to think of what people are going to do. So one of the things that Felix starts out with, he said, when you think of an animal and you picture it climbing, then we have it climbing. He said you craft your habitat however you want, limited only by your own imagination, and so long as there is an animal nearby who enjoys climbing, and then off they go. So what we lead into that is, you know, it's probably not just going to be chimpanzees. I mean, we haven't had a gorilla confirmation. We don't know if maybe the jaguars, if we have jaguars, I'm pretty sure we will. We don't have any confirmation of that yet, but jaguars maybe taking them up in the tree. We don't know if maybe the other type of big cats, even lions, you know, the tigers, all of that will, you know, from time to time actually make their way up into trees. And I don't see why, if they say limited by your own imagination, if an animal in the real world climbs trees or climbs climbing structures, yours will too. Yeah, so I definitely don't think big cats are off limits. And of course we know the lemurs will. Haven't heard anything about pandas, or particularly red tail pandas. I'm sure they will. If we have sloths, I'm sure we'll have koala bears that they'll have climbing structures. So the way they word this, there is a lot of animals. And, you know, I think it's like Jonty said in his video, I don't think they mean, I'm assuming they don't mean like when they say lots of animals, like 20 chimpanzees. I think they mean a variety of animals. And like they mentioned, anything you see in the real world that can climb will climb in this game. And then Richard said, the idea is that any scenery we've tagged as climbable can be placed with the same freedom that you have when placing regular types of scenery in a Planet game, and animals will climb on it. Navigation and climbing in games are generally marked up by hand by a level designer, and then it basically says the level will not change during its lifetime in game. So with our Planet games, the player has the freedom to build what they want at any location and in any orientation. The game then has to decide how and where it should try to climb, i.e. the animals have to decide where should they try to climb. And, you know, that is just, that is some really interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff to hear on this. And then Felix goes on to talk about everything they've tried to do about this in respect to the climbing is so ambitious. And he talks about coding it to get things to move around sensibly on uneven ground. And then he said, let alone adding vertical surfaces and then jumping on top of that. He said, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, to quote Felix on the actual post, he says, we have to try to get into the mind of every single player who will pick up the game and try to anticipate what they will build. And going back to the last podcast that a couple of us did, beyond Drew and Jonty, it goes back to the original Silverette formula, I think, when the developers of the dev team of Planet Coaster, when Sylv, I think, started building that first Grizzly Valley, were absolutely blown away. And I think that is something that we have is going so much better for it on Planet Zoo over Planet Coaster in the beginning. Planet Coaster was such a massive experiment, and now, like we mentioned in the podcast, they know what we're going to try to do. They know what the hardcore players, what the content creators, and what the people that are going to spend 1,000+ hours in Planet Zoo are going to do. In Planet Coaster, they didn't really have a clue. I mean, the Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 hardcore creator community was such a niche community that, there's probably just a few hundred of us probably doing that still, on a decade-old game. So there was really, unless you were, like, I remember when this first came out, I thought when I was even back in the Shy Guys world, forum days, I thought of all of the Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 people like Mass Bandit and Mike and Silverette and, Imagineer Tim, Station Jim Jr. I remembered thinking, I wonder if these guys are going to make the jump over to Planet Coaster. And some of them did, some of them didn't. But the point being is, now Frontier knows. They know what's going to happen as soon as this drops. They know we're going to be making like massive tiger temples and river otter dams with massive, like glass walled behind water. And that's another thing too that maybe you guys can allude to down in the comments section. I wonder how high we'll be able to make the glass and how deep the water will be able to be. So, what I'm saying is, picture you have a 4-meter wall, just like a regular wall piece. Can I stack, like if that's glass, can I stack that 4 or 5 pieces high and essentially make like a large lagoon aquarium deep type water exhibit? Or how, like, that's what I'm kind of wanting to know. What are the restrictions on that? I know I'm killing you guys with always having to come back to the water, but yeah, it's just, it's kind of my thing. If you've been around for a while, you know how I get down on the water and the waterfalls and the water animals. But so anyways, yeah, a lot of different stuff pops into my head when we start talking about, like Richard and Felix are, when they say, different players want different things for a game. And hopefully with our approach, they say we're allowing you to dictate what is possible. And they said one thing that this is on Felix's part. He says, we have to try to get into the mind of every single player who will pick up the game and try to anticipate what they will build. Tough job. Given that they have limitless possibilities, and then try to get the animals to behave in a sensible and interesting way. A question we have to ask ourselves a lot. Do you limit the amount of things a player can do to preserve the feeling of realism? And then he says, for me, the quote-unquote limitless potential approach of Planet Coaster is too fun and interesting to not let people have that. And that is one of the most, that is one of my most anticipated, highlighted lines of this whole developer journal. That if Felix speaks for the studio, they don't want to limit people. They're saying there is too much possible to limit people from having that much fun and taking the Planet Coaster approach in Planet Zoo. And then he ends that section by saying different players want different things for a game, and hopefully with our approach we are allowing you to dictate what is possible and what isn't. And then Richard, Felix goes on to talk about challenges here in a minute, but Richard, his next part said, it was difficult to try and pick a sensible path through any number of climbing pieces configured in any arrangement. Given the freeform nature of the scenery building, there's a massive amount of edge cases to try and consider when picking the best path through a ball of climbable bits. So that goes back to another point that John T was making. I think when we're talking in the sense of limitation, there has to be some kind of limitation in place to probably keep people from making a climbing structure 2 miles into the air, and then trying to make the chimpanzees maybe navigate and maze their way to the top of that. So if we're talking on a realistic standpoint, I think it is realistic of us to probably accept there are going to have to be certain limitations, possibly game breaking limitations that have to be accounted for. So. And then he goes on to say another challenge was that in most games, stuff like climbing is reserved for a single character, where you can afford lots of animations and transitions because that character is the main focus. Comes to mind, Assassin's Creed. Stuff like that, where the animations only have to focus on your one main character for the most part. And in this, you might have a family of 20 gorillas, climbing on stuff and having to be animated at the same time. And like we said, the game is actually making decisions on the fly about what you've just put down and if the animals are going to be interested in it, if they can traverse it. Lots of stuff under the hood going on here. And then his section really, I'm going to link this down below, really substantial size developer journal here that I won't keep you here going over all of it, but let's at least hit some of the main parts here. And so Richard's next section, he said, we ended up with a bunch of main animation loops as well as transitions in, out, and between them to try and cover everything. Given the kind of dynamic movement a Western chimpanzee in a tree might do, our animators have a great challenge to try and condense that into an animal's animation. So, code for short, that is not easy to do. But, and then Felix follows Richard up. He said, but challenges aside, it was important to have climbing in Planet Zoo. Half of a lemur's day is spent in the canopy of a tree, so it's arguably the more interesting part of their lives, as they're pretty ninja when climbing. The experience of seeing your animal approach your, hopefully, lovingly assembled climbing habitat for the first time and discovering how it interacts with it is pretty powerful. Some animals will want to climb as it's in their nature, and having climbable habitats improve their well-being. Others are able to climb but might not be so inclined, and these you might need to coax with food or treats. So, obviously, too, we know right there, if the animals are not wanting to go up into their climbing structures, that's pretty much confirmed now. We'll be able to put their treats and their toys actually up in some of these areas. So, maybe if you want to make a tree house type exhibit for the chimpanzees, but put their food up there, they will essentially, what Felix and Richard are saying, they will use the climbing structure, if not anything else, to get to the food. So, guys, like I said, I will go ahead and link this article down below. There is a lot left. I just don't want to keep you guys here for 30 minutes babbling on about this stuff, even though some of you guys may quite enjoy that. But anyways, go ahead and check that out and let me know in the comment section down below what you bring back from it. And, one last thing I wanted to hit on, you'll notice it down at the very, very bottom of the article. And this is Richard giving a pretty cool Planet Coaster shout out. And Richard says, having seen some of the amazing creations from Planet Coaster, the sheer amount of assets used in single construction is something I'm currently setting my mind on. The next step in the features development is to set the right number of limitations to making climbing frames so you can still build to your heart's desire without losing the authenticity of the Planet Zoo world. I'd love to see people having fun with it. You will be able to easily make something the animals will just start interacting with immediately. I think that moment where you see a ring-tailed lemur sitting on top of the thing you just built will be super cool, and I hope you guys like it. And then in the last part that I tweeted out about is he said, and some animals may prefer to spend time off the floor and will simply climb for fun. Climbing may also provide a way out of their habitat. You build your tree too close to the roof of a shelter and they're going to get up there. So that is just another thing that I am just cheesing over right now. Just the thought of having to have that, be in your thought process and your design process that these guys may get out if that tree limb is hung over just a little too far over to the roof, or the climbing structure is a little too close to a fence or a wall. That is very, very interesting stuff. But anyways, guys, I'm S. Dan Wolf. Thank you for stopping by and hanging out with me, and let me know what you think down below. We'll keep this going in the comments section about your thoughts, good or bad, on this next Dev Journal. So thank you for stopping by and hanging out with me, and I will catch you in the next video. Thank you. See you guys.